Have you ever imagined dying and coming back with a direct message from Jesus about what will happen in 2025? In today's video, learn the true story of Dr. Emily Reese, a skeptical doctor who had a profound NDE and came back with a phrase that will stay with you. July will be the month of change. If this topic intrigues you, like it, subscribe to the channel, and comment below from which city you're watching. Let's spread this message together. My name is Emily Reese. I'm 38 years old and a general surgeon in Boston, and I didn't believe in any of it. No heaven, no afterlife. Science was my gospel, the scalpel my sword. But one October morning in 2024, I walked into surgery as a doctor and walked out as a messenger. The irony, I wasn't supposed to be the patient on that table, but I was. Aneurysm. Rare, rapid, fatal. I went into cardiac arrest seconds before they reached my brain. The monitors beeped. My colleagues tried everything, but my body had stopped, and that's where it all began. There was no tunnel, no light at the end, just a sound, a very faint echo, like a vibration within the silence. I was floating, but not like in the movies. It was as if time itself was carrying me. And then, someone said my name, not with a voice, but with a presence. Emily, you always thought science explained everything. Now look what science still doesn't remember. I turned. I was in a field of blue and gold light, where the ground wasn't ground, and the sky seemed to pulse with memory. And in the center of it, he appeared, not a man with a crown, but peace with a face. Jesus. He just smiled. And beside him, a line of light stretched to the horizon. You came at exactly the right time. Now I'll show you why 2025 isn't the end. It's the calling. When Jesus extended his hand to me, I felt something strange. It wasn't a touch. It was a memory. It was as if my soul had held that hand before, in dreams, in quiet moments, even in surgeries where I nearly lost patience and prayed, without knowing to whom. You think you never believed, but you just forgot. With these words, he led me to the beginning of the beamline, and there, the earth unfolded before us, not as a globe, but as a soul, a heart beating at various frequencies, with entire regions vibrating louder than others. What is that? It's the spiritual map of Earth, and it's about to change. 2025 is the year the veil falls. The line glowed brighter, and words began to form in the sky, not written in ink, recorded in bright light. The first one said, July. This is when it begins, the month where souls will begin to hear what the world has tried to silence. And then he showed me people from all over the world waking up in tears without knowing why. Some in the middle of traffic, others in classrooms, parents looking at their children and feeling a weight lift from their chests, as if they'd forgotten who they were and were remembering again. You call it intuition, we call it reconnection. I saw a woman in Tokyo kneeling in an empty temple, crying without understanding why. A farmer in Texas stopping his hoe and looking up at the sky, as if seeing someone he loved. And stranger still, everyone was muttering the same thing in different languages. I remember. That's the plan, said Jesus. Not of destruction, but of remembrance, of return, of purpose. I started to cry, and it wasn't from fear. It was from relief, because, somehow, I knew this was true, and that my skepticism wasn't strength. It was protection against something I'd always wanted to believe but never allowed myself to. And me? Why me? Because you're a scientist. Because you understand the power of the invisible even without calling it that. He pointed to the earth. Now see what comes. The map vibrated and began to shake, not like an earthquake, like an awakening. Medicine teaches how to save bodies, he said, but now you will help save memories. And in that instant, I understood. 2025 wasn't the end of the world. It was the end of oblivion. We were transported, steplessly, to a gigantic structure made of columns of living light, as if the architecture were designed by emotion, not calculation. Inside, millions of tiny points of light hovered in the air, each pulsating with a unique frequency, like the heartbeats of souls. Where are we? In the listening room, Jesus said, where every sincere request finds its echo. My eyes strained to follow each light. Some sparkled like laughter, others trembled like stifled screams, but all alive. Are these prayers? Some didn't even know they were. Some were just sighs. lonely thoughts never spoken aloud. But here, nothing is lost. And then he reached out and touched one of the spots. A voice whispered, trembling and small, "I just wanted to know if anyone sees me." My heart broke. This wasn't theater. It was real. It was raw. It was human. "Is she alive?" I asked. "Yes, and she will see it in July." Each light was a window to the invisible. And in the distance I saw something terrifying. Some lights did not go up. They floated heavily, trapped. These are stuck. Why? Doubt, skepticism, but even fractured faith has value here. He showed me one of these gray spheres. Inside it, a man prayed angrily, "If you exist, prove it." Does even this prayer rise? Especially this one, because it's honest. Heaven prefers sincere anger to feigned faith. In that moment, I saw myself as he saw me, not as a doctor, not as a woman, but as a soul. And my soul trembled because it remembered. You were born knowing. You only forgot because the world teaches you to forget. The lights began to spiral, forming what looked like a vortex of remembrance. In the center, I saw a giant word form in golden fire: choice. 2025 will be the year millions realize they have always had a choice: to live as forgotten or to wake up. The tears flowed without me feeling ashamed. He didn't make me feel inferior. He made me feel real. And before we left, he said to me, "Your new plan isn't to explain, it's to awaken." Science seeks proof, but there, in that room where time listens and the soul responds, I found something no microscope will ever see: purpose. In an instant, the listening room vanished, as if it had been but a whisper from the universe. Jesus and I were now in an open space, without ground, without roof, but with a complete view of the earth, not geographical but spiritual. The earth before us pulsed like a gigantic heart. Its contours were formed not by mountains or oceans, but by human emotions: love, fear, compassion, anger, longing. "This is the true anatomy of the world," said Jesus. "That's what really keeps everything going." From above, it was as if we could see people's intentions shaping the destiny of humanity. Every thought generated a ripple, every choice, a glow or a shadow. And then I saw something even more impressive. 3 great vibrations formed around the globe, like invisible magnetic fields. These are the 3 groups of 2025 explained: those who will forget again, those who will panic, and those who will remember. The earth seemed to shake, but not from catastrophe. It was as if a body that wakes up after years of anesthesia. "What is coming is not a punishment," he said. "It's a purification, a shedding of skin." At every point on the planet where someone stopped to reflect, a flash appeared, and when several did this at the same time, a beam of light united distant hearts, as if the soul of a stranger responded to that of another. I saw a young woman in Alaska lighting a candle for her grandmother. At the same moment, a man in Nigeria whispered the same name, family, without ever having met, prayed for each other, and heaven brought them together. "This happens every day," said Jesus. "But now in 2025 it will become visible." And then came the moment that broke my heart. He pointed to the United States, the land of my birth, the land where I learned to save lives. But what I saw was a country shining in wounds, not political, not economic, wounds of the soul. "She is torn," I said with a shaky voice. "No, it's being broken to be replanted," Jesus answered. She looked so lost, because he mistook noise for truth. And then, slowly, the American flag appeared, but not in cloth, in light, and it didn't flutter on a flagpole. It pulsed in the hearts of anonymous people. "They are the ones who will sustain it," he said. "The forgotten, the sensitive, those who still know what it means to love without proof." At that moment, I felt the call. It wasn't meant to be healed with a scalpel. It was meant to be healed with presence. Your new plan isn't to save, it's to remember who the saviors are. And at that point I realized, heaven is not far away. It is waiting to be remembered within us. Jesus stretched out his arm, and what appeared before us was not a vision. It was a vibration, a kind of invisible sound that crossed space like a living wave. It had no melody, but it was more powerful than any music I had ever heard. Why, what is that? It's the sound of awakening. It doesn't start with words. It starts with frequency, and that's when I saw it. In July 2025, the whole world would start to feel this vibration without understanding. It wasn't fear, it wasn't joy, it was a memory without explanation. People would clutch their chests out of the blue. Some would cry while driving. Others would wake up from dreams with phrases they didn't remember learning. "Is it a coincidence?" I asked. "It's synchronicity," he replied. "The world is being tuned for something greater." Jesus then pointed to the trees, to the animals, to the sea. Even nature will feel it. Winds will change direction for no meteorological reason. Trees will lean more gently. The sky will shine brighter after storms. And those who are still will notice. They will understand that there is something bigger trying to remember itself inside them. And then he said a phrase that still vibrates deep in my chest. "The human heart is an ancient receiver, and it will listen again." I saw a mother in Arkansas sitting with her daughter on her lap, looking at the moonlight. The child stared at the moon and said, "Mommy, she's singing." The mother didn't hear anything, but she smiled, because she felt something strange in the air. "Will the moon sing?" I asked, scared. "She already sings. You're the ones who forgot to listen." It was then that the sky opened in circles, revealing words written in light. "Choose to feel or keep run away." And just below that, 3 human silhouettes appeared, one with his eyes closed, another covering his ears, and a third with his hand on his heart. These are the 3 responses to the 2025 call. I saw people running for distractions, others screaming for external answers, but I also saw some remaining silent, not out of fear, but because they knew that something inside them was about to wake up. And then he looked at me steadily. "Emily, you'll come back to talk to these people, not to convince them, but to remind them what they already know." I felt a slight burning in my chest, and when I looked down, there was a symbol shining over my heart. It was simple, 3 intertwined waves. That's the mark of those who carry the frequency. They don't speak louder, they live deeper. There, I understood. The new plan was not to preach, shout, prove. It was to vibrate the truth so deeply that it would awaken the wordless sleepers. After the frequency went silent, I felt a subtle shift, as if the reality around us had taken a breath. Jesus led me down a path made of liquid light, which stretched like a ribbon to the horizon. As we walked, everything around us changed, and then appeared before us the most beautiful place I have ever seen, a garden where every flower was a memory. These were no ordinary flowers. They glowed with hues unheard of on earth. Some pulsed like hearts. Others murmured words in languages I'd never heard, but somehow understood. And where are we now? In the garden of unspoken words, Jesus answered. Here, the emotions people have hidden flourish, the prayers they didn't have the courage to say, the requests that died in their throats. I walked among the flowers and felt the sweet weight of all humanity. A sparkling rose whispered, "I forgive you," but I never said so. A blue flower shone softly. "I'm tired, but I'm still smiling." Are they unspoken thoughts? They are truths that the world did not accept, but heaven never ignored. I approached a flower that seemed to beckon me. When I touched its petals, a vision flashed through me like a bolt of lightning. It was me, 9 years old, locked in the bathroom of the hospital where my mother died, whispering, "I just wish someone would tell me everything is going to be okay." I fell to my knees. The flower closed gently, as if holding that moment inside itself forever. "Nothing we feel is forgotten," he said, "not even timid thoughts. Here, everything flourishes." I saw from afar a gigantic tree with names carved into the trunk. Each name pulsed with its own light. I approached, and there was mine, Emily Reese, and underneath, like a secret signature, 2 words, "Silent reminder." What does this mean? That your role will not be to prove anything, but to carry the vibration of truth without being corrupted by noise. What if I forget all this when I get back? It won't, he replied calmly, because now your body carries the scent of the garden, and whenever you miss it, it will remind you. And the others? Do they have a garden too? Everyone has it, but few dare to enter, because it demands silence, and the world is afraid of what it can hear in the silence. Then he took a small golden flower and placed it on my chest. "This is your seed. Your new plan begins with it." At that moment, I understood that my mission was not to talk about what I saw, but to live in a way that would make others remember what they had forgotten. After the garden, we followed a path that seemed to be made of solid state time. Each step I took showed me a forgotten memory of the world, and then we arrived at a place that took my breath away. It was an infinite field, not of flowers, but of ordinary people, shining. They weren't on stages. They weren't giving speeches. They weren't wearing crowns or uniforms. They were silent, but the light that came from them was stronger than any earthly lighthouse. "Who are they?" I asked, with a lump in my throat. "The invisibles," Jesus answered, "those who have never been recognized by the world, but who are pillars in heaven." I saw an elderly woman carefully folding clothes at an orphanage, a young man repairing children's bicycles for free, a mother reading stories to her children even after an exhausting day. And then I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. A doctor, crying silently, sitting on the edge of an empty bed. "Era, you." That moment, it was when I lost my first patient. "And you thought you failed," he said. "But in heaven, that was light." "How can this be?" "Because you chose to feel. And feeling, Emily, is the deepest portal of remembrance." To each person in the field, Jesus lovingly pointed and said, "This one planted hope when no one saw it. This one offered forgiveness without ever receiving it back. She continued loving even though she was ignored." And then he said something that cut through the air. "They make no noise, but heaven hears every step." I saw black lights trying to get closer to them, forms made of fear, doubt, discouragement, but they couldn't touch them. And it wasn't because they fought. It was because didn't react. They just remained true. Is that strength? This is the strength the world has forgotten. The strength that comes from the heart, that persists, even when everything screams to give up. Then he pointed to a child kneeling, touching the cracked ground with both hands. Slowly, a flower sprouted from the concrete. Silent love rebuilds what power cannot. I remained silent. Tears streamed down my face, not from pain, but from a memory that, until that moment, my soul carried alone. "You are part of this field now," he said. "Your new plan isn't to stand out. It's to shine where no one wants to look." And with that sentence, I felt something profound. God never hid from the humble. It was the world that taught itself to ignore them. Jesus then led me to a place that seemed completely different from anything I had seen before. It was a gigantic dome made of metallic light, full of pulsating circuits, gears made of energy, and thousands of screens floating in the air. Inside it, time did not seem linear. Information passed like waves, statistics, faces, decisions, predictions. It was like being inside the mind of a system. "This is where the world thinks it will find the answers," he said calmly. Is this artificial intelligence?" But Jesus showed no fear. He walked serenely, while I tried to understand what I saw. Simulations of people being reproduced perfectly, their voices, their emotions, their memories, but without souls. "It may seem human, but it does not breathe truth," he said, "because only the Spirit carries purpose, and the Spirit cannot be programmed." I saw a child talking to a virtual assistant who said comforting phrases, but the sparkle in her eyes didn't change. It was an empty consolation. No vibration, no presence. "Is this dangerous?" I asked. "Only for those who forget what it's like to truly feel. Can it replace human connection? Never. But you can convince the distracted person that you replaced it." Jesus then approached a panel where millions of commands flowed like rivers of code. With a simple gesture of the hand, everything stopped. "See, even if the world speeds up, presence stops the chaos." And then he looked at me deeply. "The new plan requires you to remind the world what it is to be human before the definition is redrawn." I approached a screen where I saw my own image, recreated by an algorithm, talking, smiling, even crying, but without vibration, without soul. That isn't me. It's the reflection of the surface. But who you are vibrates much deeper. Will people believe these imitations? Some, but only those who had already forgotten how to feel. And then he said something that stuck with me like fire. "The intelligence that forgets the soul creates simulations of love, but true love cannot be imitated, because it is choice, and choice is divine." There, I understood that the greatest risk of the future, it is not the machine dominating man. It is man forgetting that he is not a machine. "You will come back to be a reminder," he said. "And your new plan isn't to compete with the noise. It's to bring back the touch, the sigh, the healing silence." And with that, we left the summit. But something became clear inside me. 2025 would bring the height of confusion between real and false, and those who truly feel would be the invisible guides of humanity. We walked again, along a path that seemed to be made of stardust. The sky above us shimmered, as if waiting for something to happen. And then we arrived at a new place, a vast open plain where thousands of people stood, silent. And yet, there was war. But it was not an ordinary war. There were no weapons. There was no screaming. What was happening there was a frequency clash. "Are they fighting?" I asked. "They are waking up," Jesus answered. "This is the camp of the quiet rebellion." Those people didn't speak. They didn't wave flags. They didn't march with slogans. But their every gesture was a silent earthquake. I saw a man sticking a letter of forgiveness on the door of someone who hurt him. I saw a woman praying for someone who hated her. I saw a teenager returning the backpack of someone who had attacked him, with a note. "I remember who you were before the anger." Is this a revolution? It is the only revolution that transforms without destroying, that of remembrance. Around them, shadows loomed. Doubt, lies, ego. But instead of facing it with fury, these quiet ones just remained. And with that, the shadows receded. Jesus then pointed to a young woman in the center of the field. She held a lit candle in the wind, but the flame would not go out. She has no followers. No one shares what she does. But in heaven, she is considered a general of light. Why? Because you chose to stay true, even when no one sees. And then he turned to me, more serious. "Emily, 2025 will bring a choice for many. Shout at the world, or shine with determination. The greatest rebellion will be those who refuse to play the game of division. They will be called weak, slow, foolish, but they will be the bearers of the new frequency." At that moment, I saw flashes of what was to come. People leaving empty jobs due to internal calls. Young people leaving social media and starting to write by hand. Couples forgiving each other after decades of hurt. Neighbors exchanging silence for coffee and conversation. And a sentence appeared in the sky like a calm thunder. They didn't come to convince. They came to remind. Are they the new plan? They are his seeds. I saw an elderly woman kneel down and whisper a wordless prayer. And when she finished, the earth beneath his knees blossomed. This is the language of the new era. Invisible actions with eternal impact. There, I understood that the noise of the world will increase in 2025. But the sky does not respond with more noise. He responds with lives lived as prayer. Jesus touched my shoulder and said, "You will return to light these flames, one by one, silently, with courage." The atmosphere around us began to change. The light that had once seemed infinite now took on soft hues, as if the sky was preparing to let me go. My heart sank. I knew what that meant. "Is it time?" I asked in a choked voice. Jesus didn't answer with words. He just looked at me, and in his eyes, everything was said. Return to earth, back to the noise, for the rush, to oblivion. "I don't want to forget all this," I confessed. "What if I get lost again?" He smiled tenderly, like someone looking at a child holding a fragile treasure. "You only get lost when you try to remember with your mind, but the heart already knows the way." At that moment, the landscape around us disappeared. A staircase made of liquid light, descending towards what appeared to be Earth, but vibrating at a different frequency. Where does it lead? To the moment of your return breath, when time will call you back. Before I got off, he approached me one last time. His gaze burned, not with fire, but with truth. And then he said, "Your new plan is to live as if you remembered all along, even when it seems like you forgot." I remained silent. What if no one believes me? It is not your mission to be believed. It is your mission to vibrate what you have seen, until others feel it without knowing why. And then he placed his hand on my chest. I felt no heat. I felt no pain. I felt origin. You are the echo of memory, the reflection of the call, the bridge between what has been forgotten and what will blossom. His last words did not come as a voice. They came as a code in the heart. July is when the soul touches the sky without leaving Earth. The stairs began to pull me down. Tears streamed down, but not of sadness, of honor. I wasn't the same. When I opened my eyes, I was on a gurney, the sound of a heart monitor, agitated voices, the cold light of the hospital, but inside me, The golden light still sang. A nurse shouted, "She's back, she's breathing on her own." And my first word, almost voiceless, was, to remember, I didn't survive. I woke up. If you enjoyed this beautiful spiritual testimony, please leave a like, comment, share your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.